is. And I wrote poetry all through college. I think I decided by the time I graduated that I wasn't a very good poet. And that
Why?
I just wasn't. I wasn't a very good poet. I don't feel like I have a real gift for creative writing. I think I am much happier doing analytical, scholarly literary criticism.
Okay.
Yeah, so I sort of just said there are people who are more talented than me. Let them do that. I mean, I actually moved
Oh.
to San Francisco after I graduated. Thought, oh, I'm going to be a poet.
Oh, you're all over the place.
Yeah, I
Wow,
moved to
just
San
like
Francisco from
everywhere.
Philly. I lived with a poet. My roommate was a
That's
poet.
awesome.
I wrote poetry. I went to
Did she write like professionally? Like, did she?
He still
Oh,
does.
sorry.
He's a published poet. He's just a friend,
That's
but
awesome.
um yeah, but no, I just didn't stick with poetry.
So is that like your first memory of poetry, or did you have a memory from when you were younger, or?
A memory of a poetry. Not really. I mean, I didn't grow up in a very like literature oriented household.
Hmm.
I read. My mom loved to read, but poetry wasn't really a part of it. More music, I would say, than poetry. My father was a
Yeah.
singer, and we all sang, and there was a lot of lyrics and a lot of
Yeah.
music like that
Yeah. Same for me.
aspect.
My mom was always very, musically.
Yeah,
She loves music, still does, and would write like. And I've told Emery this before. Like, she would just write on scraps of paper, just lyrics to songs, and her
yeah,
handwriting is that beautiful cursive that doesn't get taught anymore.
no,
And I would just like look at it and be like, "This is so pretty. Why are you writing this? Like, tell me what it's about." And she was like, "Well, if you ever want to write anything, just because,
yeah,
write it. You never know if it's going to be great, or if you hate it, throw it
yeah.
away. But if it's great, then it's great, and you get to
Right.
keep it,
And
it's
you're
on paper."
expressing it,
Yeah.
and you've written it down.
So that's cool. Let's see. What else do we have? Since when did poetry become important? And okay, as a professor of literature, do you feel that poetry plays a larger part in your life than it does for other people?
I think so, yeah. Well, I don't know. It doesn't play more of a role in my life than people who are poets or love poetry.
Right.
But I think for the average person who doesn't, traffic in the world of literature a whole lot on a regular basis, then yeah, probably. I mean, I read poetry, I wouldn't say daily, but certainly weekly. There's a week of my life that goes by that I don't read
Wow.
poetry in some way. I mean, even if it's just I get a poem a day in my inbox
Yeah.
just for fun.
But do you try to like, if you come across something that you love that's a poem, do you try to, tell someone, "Hey, I read this, maybe you can read it, or you should read it," or you kind of just keep it as one of those things that you read to yourself?
I don't share it with a lot of people. If it's something that I think would mean something to someone in particular, I would share it. But no, not that. It's more my own thing.
Is there any like theme of poetry that you're drawn to, like romantic poems or tragic poems, or just kind of
Um,
anything?
I like poetry by women. I think that is probably what I'm most drawn to is poetry that reflects women's experience and women's subjectivity in some way. I think for all literary forms,
Right.
I'm just really interested in seeing the kind of range of women's experiences, whether they're similar to mine or completely different,
Mm-hmm.
represented, and just sort of what's going on in women's minds. I'm interested in that. I feel like the world is not that interested in that, but like I'm there for that.
Yeah, which
I
is
wanna-
awesome. They
I
need
wanna
people.
know
I mean,
that.
we need people
Yeah.
who are there for that, and that's why I was
Yeah.
so happy that I got the opportunity, because I've never been to a poetry reading, like for my
Right.
review, to be able to go. And like I was so nervous at first. I was like, I don't know if there's going to be a lot of people who know so much about poetry and I don't. And then once Nancy and Cynthia started talking, I was like, they are so cool.
They
I was like,
are.
and these are amazing poems. Like, even if I can't understand them right now, like I want to go home and look them up and see like what else I can read to like understand it. And I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
Can I tell you an amazing poetry story?
Go ahead.
Okay, so yesterday I was with my friend Natasha. We're writing a book together, and we meet on usually on the weekend, and we go to this coffee shop in Audubon, New Jersey.
Mhm.
And we were. It was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We were walking into the coffee shop, and this woman, who's like standing across the street, looks at us and says, "Are you writers?" And we said, yeah, are you? And I said, I said, why are you asking? She said, well, there's supposed to be this meeting here in this coffee shop of like the South Jersey Writers Group or Collective, and I don't know anyone here. I just drove up from Maryland, so I was wondering if you were going to that meeting. And we were like, no, we're not going to that meeting, but that's so cool. We introduced ourselves. We were talking. We all walked in together, and then it turned out that that whole group that was supposed to be there was not there. So she walked over to us. Her name was May. And we talked for a few minutes, and I said, what are you working on? She said, a book of poetry. I said, oh, are you going to publish it? And she said, would you like to hear a poem?
Oh.
And she stood there and she recited from memory this incredible poem. She was Japanese American and grew up in Hawaii, and her family had her uncle had been in World War II.
Okay.
And the girl had come home from school. The girl in the poem, like the persona speaker, had come home from school and had said to her uncle, "Someone in school today told me that the Holocaust was made up and nothing happened to the Jews in Germany." And this is just like the poem. And the uncle says, "Well, I know it happened because I was there." And the uncle goes on to explain what the liberation of a concentration camp was like from his perspective. The people with arms as thin as sticks, and them giving them chocolate to eat, and them being so hungry they ate all the wrappers and everything, and shivering, and giving them blankets. And she's reading this poem. We're standing, Natasha and I, listening to her read this poem, which she's reading with feeling. It's a full coffee house. No one else is paying any attention. I'm crying.
I was going to say, were you crying? Because that sounds really sad.
I'm crying. Natasha's eyes are teared up. My jaw just dropped.
And it just happened.
Just happened out of the blue. And then I said, so I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her and said, thank you for that poem. And Natasha hugged her. And then it turned out, and then I'll stop the poem, but she actually was coming down to the Seaview because she's been going to this poetry getaway that Peter Murphy, who is affiliated with Stockton and has Murphy Writing here, he's been running for 20 years. So she was giving herself her own writer's retreat and going to the Seaview.
In Galloway.
In Galloway. She was just stopping at this coffee shop on the way.
That's crazy.
Right?
And she knows Emory. Like that whole experience. And she knows Emory. Of course she knows Emory.
Her name is May. So
that's incredible, though. Yeah. I mean, for that to just happen out of nowhere, and for her to, it's a lot of pressure, too, to just stand and
it was beautiful.
Recite that entire poem, especially something as emotional as that.
That was one of the most just unique things that's ever happened to me.
That's
right?
Amazing.
To just someone to come up and say, Can I tell you my poem?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It really is.
There's your poetry story.
I know. Well, do you want to read your poem? That way, when I go back into editing, if I want to put the poem that you chose into the podcast.
Do you have any? I can't read that poem because I don't have it.
Did you choose anything that you wanted to read?
I brought a poem, but was that it of your questions?
Yeah, I don't know how far.
I don't know how it was either.
We're in 10:30. No, that's great. That's fantastic. I love that story too. That was my first question. Was did you cry? Because I'm so emotional when people read poetry, and it was just.
Did copy one.
That's my first question.
Do you like poetry?
I love poetry. I really do. I love to write. I just kind of get in my own way, and I get too in my own head about writing. So that's why I was asking you to post a sample paper, because I think I overthought the essay.
Right.
And then I was like, I don't know if this is good. And then my boyfriend read it, and he just told me that I'm great at everything. So I was like, I need someone's opinion who isn't so,
such a fan.
Exactly.
What's it I do with the poem? Can you pause for a second? Or you want to keep going?
No, I can just edit it out. It's okay.
Okay.
No worries.
I did. I went and found, so I didn't know which one to do. So I found a bunch of them. Oh, wait, maybe it's here. No, it's not there. All right. This is the kind of week I'm having. It's all right. I'll find one for
No,
you
you're fine.
really fast.
Do not worry.
How short? A short one, right?
Yeah, she said just 3 minutes or less. Or you can pull something from something
I
that's
could
larger.
pull something from the drawers, but from the shelf, but it would be easier to find it online. I'll do this one. There's so many of them. This is a good one, though. It's pretty short.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is a poem I've loved for a long time. It's called "To Be of Use" by Marge Piercy. So Marge Piercy is a feminist author who was probably more popular in the 80s
Okay.
when I was a college student. And so she kind of, I think, shaped to some degree my taste in poetry, maybe, the kinds of things I love.
Mm-hmm.
The other two poems, one was one by Cindy King. She has one that I really love, but I don't know what happened to it. And then there's an Emily Dickinson poem that I really love too. that's just sort of a mantra poem to me called "The Brain is Wider Than the Sky," but this is called "To Be of Use." Okay. The people I love the best jump into work head first, without dallying in the shadows, and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves, an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust, but the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real.
I love that. That's really great. I mean, I feel like poems like that kind of remind you of how few people that you can find that are like that.
Right.
You know, that are like ready to just dive headfirst into something without, finding distractions or being lazy and just like finding like a real use for themselves, like finding something they can really get into and work at.
And the idea of having purpose. Right. Whatever you're doing, like whether it's something, really important and profound, or whether you're just cooking for your friends or, taking care of, cleaning up your house or whatever it is, like the notion of just doing things purposefully and mindfully and, with a kind of commitment no matter what it is.
Yeah, I have to remind myself of that sometimes.
Right.
I feel like
it's easy because it all feels like it's too much, right? It all
does.
feels like it's too much and it gets blurry. But the idea that the work you're doing is useful, right? It's a value, and when people get together and do work, it's even better, right? When they pull together.
Yeah.
So I like that.
I do. I really like that, and
that's Marge Piercy.
Marge Piercy.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
I'll look into some of her other stuff.
Yeah.
Too. And the Emily Dickinson was.
It's a poem called "The Brain is Wider Than the Sky."
The brain is wider than the sky.
I can't do poems by heart, but it's basically the idea is that the brain can contain everything, right? It can contain the sky. It can contain every idea that ever existed. So that our imagination is essentially the most powerful force that there is.
Sounds deep. Sounds awesome, though. I like that. The brain is wider than the sky.
Yeah.
That's like a good quote. Well, thank you.
It's like a sponge sucking up the whole ocean.
I know.
It's her image, right? So cool.
I really appreciate you doing this for me.
You're welcome. It's
Thank
fun.
you so much.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you agreed. I was nervous.
Nah, it's fun.
But we are going to be late for class if we don't go because
Okay.
it's 3:23.
Oh, super. We
So I'm
gotta
gonna
go.
pause.